Hi, and welcome to episode 8 of Talking Shit About with me, Elizabeth Whipperman, and in the background, Martok the puppy ripping cardboard. She just got spayed, so I was gonna say I'm just letting her do whatever she wants, but I kind of do that anyways. Let's see. Today we're gonna be talking about obsessive compulsive disorder with artist Graham Barey. I loved this interview because oh my god, now the cats are meowing in the background. Oh my god, it's been a week. The interview was great because Graham really carried it. I did not pound coffee as per my usual pre-podcast ritual, so yeah, he did great. And I really hope you get something out of this episode. I sure did. And I will have a bunch of information at the end of the podcast. I've started to record outros, so they're a little less awkward when they end. So, yeah, I will have more info for you at the end of the podcast. But for now, let's go ahead and talk some shit. Okay, everybody, I am here today with Graham Barey, artist out. Oh my god, I already fucked it up and it's only sentence one. And then I messed up the sentence talking about the sentence. Okay, one more time. I am here with Graham Barey, an artist based out of Portland, Oregon, which is close to where I am now, which makes it extra exciting. Graham, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Wow, this is such an awkward intro. I feel like normally I'm a little less awkward than this. So I'm gonna ask you a whole bunch of personal questions today, but before I
Sure.
start, I figured I'd let you get in a little bit about yourself, and what you do before we really dive into it.
Yeah. So I I'm a 40-year-old man. I've lived in and around Portland for a very long time. I'm originally from the East Coast, but I moved out to Oregon with my family when I was a kid and grew up mainly around here. I've worked as a graphic designer for a long time, 15 years or so since I graduated college. But my passion, or what I really like to do with my time, is illustration work, particularly comics. I've been trying to advance my skills as a, in quotation marks, cartoonist for about 5 years. I got a kind of a wild idea 5 or 6 years ago that I wanted to I wanted to do cartooning. I wanted to be a cartoonist. It was something that I wanted to do as a kid, and I had never invested the amount of time it really takes to get better at drawing. And I was at a sort of a crossroads in my life, and I decided that this is something I wanted to invest time in. So since then, I've been writing and drawing comics, which initially were uh, exclusively diary comics, what are called diary comics by, sort of semi pejoratively by people who make them and read them, which is just to say autobio stuff about my life and a lot about my struggles with mental health over the years. And since then, I've tried to create a little bit of distance between my own life and the things that I draw about, and write about, just so it's not exclusively um, like from my own. It's from my voice, but not like depicting myself in cartoon form doing these things or living life. So I try to get a little bit more distance that way now, which I think invites more people in to see themselves in it, hopefully. But yeah. I live here in Portland with my wife and a couple of cats and a dog, and Yeah, I think that about sums it up.
When you say cartoonist, do you mean like I mean obviously the webcomic online, which is how I found you and your work. But is that like editorial comics and
Well, I think that the term cartoonist is a funny one. Sometimes people use it as a negative thing. I think, oh, that's not a serious artist. It's a cartoonist or something. But yeah, cartoonist can apply to a lot of different sorts of art. I think of a cartoonist as somebody who draws cartoons, principally comics. That was the kind of industry term that was used for a long period of time for people like Charles Schultz and your Bill Watterson and people who had strips in the Sunday newspaper, and not necessarily the people who drew comic books like your Jack Kirby or someone. That I think that had more the term of comic book artist or comic artist, and later graphic novelist. But in the I'm not like Mr. Comics. I don't know a hell of a lot of people in it, but from my experience, cartoonist is kind of a term for a person that writes and draws their stuff and is creating comics. In this in 2021, it's not a negative thing to be labeled of. And I think it's sort of aspirational. A cartoonist is kind of a auteur, like I reference those people like Charles Schultz, like Bill Watterson, like Gary Larson. All those people wrote and drew and lettered and did everything themselves. So it's sort of a one creator vision for making the whole thing. Whereas a comic book artist, like I referenced Jack Kirby, he was a penciler. He would, create all the art in pencil, and then someone else would come along and ink it, which is much more common in the sort of assembly line style of comics production, because it's requires more volume, a lot more work. So long tangential explanation there, but that's, I guess, how I define cartoonist.
yeah, I feel like there is that sort of like I don't even know if it's a stigma, but around like animation and just sort of cartoony style art as sort of like immature, but that's definitely not the case. Especially as someone who draws kind of in that style. Definitely very biased. But I think it's especially useful when we're looking at topics of that are a little bit dark. So like things like mental illness, maybe having images that are a little softer, make it a little less, I don't know, make it easier to approach, I guess. But
Sure.
this is my
Yeah.
segue into the mental illness realm and
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, let's talk about how messed up I am. And
do it. Welcome to therapy.
yeah, yeah. So I guess I'm here because I am a person who deals with obsessive compulsive disorder. Um, I have been affected by that condition for the better part of my life, and I think it is. I mean, it's not fun to talk about, really. It is uh, uh, a serious issue. It has caused me and continues to cause me a huge amount of difficulty in my life. But it is something that has I think, a misperception of it in the popular culture, especially, that even though it is difficult for me to talk about, I think it is important to discuss in an honest way what it actually is, at least from my perspective and my personal experience. because there is a lot of BS about what it is, and how it affects people.
So, what is the definition of OCD?
It's funny you should ask, because before this I thought, well, why don't I bring up the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, currently in the 5th edition, definition of OCD, which is really complicated but interesting to read. So the diagnostic criteria for obsessive compulsive disorder is A, presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both. Obsessions are defined by recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or impulses that are experienced at some time during the disturbance as intrusive and unwanted, and that in most individuals cause marked anxiety or distress. The individual attempts to ignore or suppress such thoughts, urges, or images, or to neutralize them with some other thought or action, i.e., by performing a compulsion. Compulsions are defined by repetitive behaviors, e.g., hand washing, ordering, checking, or mental acts, e.g., praying, counting, repeating words, ... Behaviors or mental acts are aimed at preventing or reducing anxiety or distress, or preventing some dreaded event or situation. However, these behaviors or mental acts are not connected in a realistic way with what they are designed to neutralize or prevent. In addition, obsessions and compulsions are time consuming, blah, 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 blah. But that gets you most of the way there to at least the kind of bare bones. What is this thing? I have only thought of myself as a person who has OCD for about 5 or 6 years, despite in work, in therapy, later looking back and saying, oh yes, well, this is something that I have dealt with for the better part of my adult life, emerging initially when I was, or most prominently when I was about 18 or 19 years old. As I said, I'm 40 now, so 20 plus years. And a lot of that was sort of unbeknownst to me, that the ways that I was acting were guided by this kind of a disorder. And I guess I should say, and when I'm speaking about this, I'm not a mental health professional. I have no training in psychology or psychiatry. Everything that I say is my own personal experience as a person who is diagnosed as having OCD. In my own experience, that first criteria that is mentioned of recurrent or persistent thoughts causing anxiety or distress is sort of the hallmark of the condition. I have at various times been antagonized by various thoughts, specifically over the years. I might have one a big kind of thing that's bothering me at one time, and that might go away in a year and become less important to me. It might get, some contradictions appear in my brain that I don't, necessarily care about whatever that thing I was obsessing about anymore. And then it gravitates to something else. I think that that's another criteria or sort of hallmark of the condition. I had a therapist once describe it to me as like whack-a-mole. People with OCD will have something that they're obsessing about, and you can receive treatment and work through whatever that specific obsession is, but then it will pick something else to obsess about later. It will reemerge in a different way. And it's a condition that, because of that, is not just one thing that, okay, I'm obsessed about this thing and then I get over it and then I'm fine. it's a consistent coming back, picking at uh, uh, whatever new things you might be afraid of or anxious about, and it continues to reemerge in that way. So it has to be managed as a chronic condition and not something that's specific short term or that can be like quickly resolved.
And so, what does that look like for you in your own life?
When I was, I said that I started experiencing this when I was about 18 or 19 years old. And just to give a little bit of background about my own, I've spoken about this in more vague terms about, things that I've been obsessed about or whatever. But these are all things that I've drawn comics about. But at a point in time, they were all things that were deeply shameful, really scary, um, intensely anxiety inducing. So I can look back on them and uh, laugh about them to some degree, but also these are things that were just horrible to experience. When I was, I guess, 19 years old, the first thing that I was really obsessed with, and that sort of came out of nowhere for me, was I had been I guess you'd call like a person who's nervous going to the bathroom in public settings, like, a ball game or something where there's a bunch of people around. Like people say like nervous bladder, right? It's a term that people have used. That was me. I experienced that when I was a kid in school and, later as I grew up, became a teenager. But for some reason, I must have had a my anxiety was increasing around that time, 18, 19 years old. And I had some kind of I can't think back that far and remember what the actual catalyst was, but I had some event, maybe I was at a show or something. And I was so anxious, I couldn't go to the bathroom. And then thereafter, it sort of spiraled into, I'm worrying all the time about, am I going to be able to go to the bathroom if I leave the house, or am I going to get so nervous that I can't? And oh no, like I need to go to the bathroom before I leave the house, and then I got to get back home before I have to go again. And so you can see how these things like they sort of start taking over and ruling your life, dictating the things that you can do or can or can't do, which is, I think, the important part to recognize about OCD versus something that you're worried about. Um, I could be worried about getting into a situation where I might have a difficult time going to the bathroom, right? But because of this, the structure of this mental condition, it becomes something that I'm thinking about all the time. I'm like trying to strategize ways to prevent myself from having to go to the bathroom. I'm not drinking water. I'm like thinking that I can't go to places where there's a lot of people because there's going to be anxiety around it. It takes over everything, and it just swells to encompass everything in your life, and starts to essentially say what you can or can't do. You live within the bounds that are set up for you by the condition, unless you challenge it, and attempt to kind of face up to that fear, and reduce the stress that's around it. Because if you practice what's called avoidance, which is what I was doing, by not going out, not going to places where there were a lot of people or all these things. It's avoidance of the situation that gives rise to the anxiety or the obsessiveness. And it was only years later that I got over this specific instance of OCD, but it wasn't through therapy at that time, because I didn't discover OCD specific therapy. And at this time, I wasn't thinking of myself as a person who had OCD. I was thinking of myself as a person who had this specific problem. And I was ashamed of it. And so I didn't, pursue good therapy for it. But eventually the situation sort of lost the gripping anxiety as you know, I got on some medication. Things got better for me at that time of my life when I was about 20 something years old. And, that thing went away and then new things came up. And again, I wasn't thinking about, oh, this is how OCD works. I was just thinking of myself as like, I was diagnosed at that time by like a family doctor with uh, generalized anxiety disorder, which is sort of the big bucket for, we don't know what your problem is, but you're super anxious. So here you go. And I took, medication throughout most of my 20s, and went through many cycles of when I would get off medication because I didn't like the side effects. Something new would happen, and I would sort of spin out on some kind of new OCD emergence. And it wasn't until much later, when I was in my mid 30s, that things got so bad that I had to explore new ways of dealing with whatever it was that was going on with me, because I didn't know. I had been on medication, but it seemed like the medication wasn't working.
And then what happened?
Basically, what happened is that I was, as I say, I was in my early mid 30s, and a bunch of life circumstances conspired together to really ratchet up my anxiety to previously unseen levels. Particularly, one of my best friends was diagnosed with terminal cancer out of the blue, and the stress of that experience, of being there for him during that experience, which lasted a year, basically just wrung out all of the any sort of sense of peace or calm that I had, and took away a lot of the fundaments of my previously more stable mental health, things that I depended on to kind of keep me going. And at the end of it, I was really, I was a huge mess, and I was beside myself with anxiety constantly. All of my relationships were in turmoil, and I didn't realize what it was caused by. But at that point, that was when I got back into therapy. I wasn't in talk therapy at that point, and then I tried various other kinds of therapy. Found me to a specialist in OCD, and that's where I gained a lot more knowledge about my situation.
Yeah, therapy. I don't know. I don't know what I would do without therapy. Every time my therapist is like, "Oh, time for a new CBT technique," I get all pissy and I'm like, "Oh God, like another one. You're gonna make me work." But it works, you know.
Yeah.
Well, usually.
Yeah,
That's the
I've had a mixed bag, like most people have with therapy. When I first started going to therapy, when I talked about that problem that emerged when I was about 19 years old, my family doctor gave me a bottle of Paxil and said, you have generalized anxiety disorder, and here's some recommended therapists. And I was in a small town at that time, and so I had never been to therapy. I just went to see somebody. I started talking, and that was my first experience with therapy and my first experience with bad therapy. This person literally fell asleep on me during a session while I was like
Oh my
spilling my
God.
guts. I had to wake her up, and then she
No.
tried to tell me that it was because she was on cold medication, and I was like, "Come on, man!"
Oh.
Yeah, another time she scolded me for premarital sex. Like, I was like, "What
Oh,
is going
good.
on here? This is not good." But I've seen a number of therapists over the years, and I'm currently in therapy with people that I like. And of course, as I'm sure the therapy is a lot about relationships, and if you trust and like the person that you're speaking to, then you're more likely, I think, to have better response to the treatment. But it does also depend on the style of therapy. You mentioned CBT, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the modalities that is used for OCD. The other one is called, there may be others, but the other one that I've experienced is called ERP, which is is an acronym for exposure with response prevention, which is a interesting kind of therapy wherein those things that you're having obsessive thoughts about, you are essentially exposed to. It's right there in the name, in a controlled way, in an attempt to gradually reduce your anxiety to those stimuli. So if I've heard of like a person who's afraid of heights and is so afraid of heights that they won't go park their car in in the top tier of a parking garage, or won't ride an elevator up past a second floor of a building or something. The therapist may take them to if their anxiety is causing them distress, they go to the third floor of the building, then they go to the third floor of the building, and they sit with that for a period of time until, and this is the kind of fuzzy part of the therapy that I had problems with, you're supposed to stay there with that stimulus until your anxiety reduces by 50%, quote unquote 50%, which is a funny thing. This to rate statistically what is your anxiety. I don't know what that means. I never did, and there is no real definition of it. It's just sort of like, I think for clinical diagnosis and these sorts of procedures, they have to have sort of numbers to be able to put down so that they can gauge if they're effective or ineffective. But in my experience with exposure therapy, I've had sort of middling, really good results on some things, and really middling and sometimes counterproductive results, because the introduction of a stimulus, if it's too strong of a stimulus, can set you back. If you're exposed to something that is really anxiety inducing for you, and it triggers a massive increase in anxiety, which then causes you to stop the therapy, then you've just made yourself more afraid of the thing. You haven't actually done the work. You just sort of like touched the hot stove, got burned, and now you're even more afraid of hot stoves, for lack of a better analogy.
So please, back to your story.
I went to, I said I started going to OCD specific therapy when I was, in my mid 30s. I had experienced several years of really intense distress, and I initially thought what I needed to do was just change my medication wasn't working. I need new medication. And then as soon as I get on better medication, this is going to fix all my problems. And what happened was the opposite of that. I tried different medications. It became really antagonistic to my anxiety. Anybody who's on meds or is experienced with meds knows, it can be a ordeal finding something that works for you. It can give you worse side effects in the short term. It's a hard process, and I found it very difficult. So at the end of that, I was off all meds, and I was a complete anxious mess. And I reached out to a I thought, well, maybe this is my problem. Maybe OCD is my problem. It starts to ring some bells. Okay, so I reached out to a therapist and I started seeing this person. And over the course of a couple of years, I we did work on numerous things that I was wrestling with. Some to a great effect, and some to a lesser effect. Um, I think I need to get a little bit more specific to be able to talk about this uh, in any effective way. So this gets a little bit complicated. It's not embarrassing necessarily. It's just like kind of specific. Um, so again, these are things that I've written about, but uh, my my life changed around 18 or 19 years old when I started to experience the emergence of great anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder symptoms. At that same time, I had been experimenting with drugs. I was smoking a lot of weed at the time, and I had done some different hallucinogens, and I had a really a bad trip on mushrooms when I was 19 years old that I was convinced for a long period of time that I had done myself, in quotation marks, brain damage from the experience. I had a intense dissociative episode, essentially feeling like I was not things weren't real. I was separated from my body. I had uh, a panic, a very, very strong panic attack, and which I can call it now, but it was an event that was so powerful that it changed the trajectory of my life and convinced me that all of my mental issues were stemming from that one thing. And I thought that for many years. I thought that I had, caused myself to have mental illness by taking drugs. And this is not an uncommon thing, I should say, that I found out later. People, people who deal with anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of people have these sort of similar experiences on drugs that can either catalyze those issues for them, or they become a focal point for obsession around. And so in the years after that experience, I was obsessed with this notion that my perception had somehow changed irrevocably, that I was, for lack of a better term, sort of broken mentally, and that I had done this all to myself, and that so there's a lot of deep shame there, and that there was nothing I could do about it to change, what had happened, what I had done, and how it would affect my life negatively. This is what I believed, and it became an almost religious belief. I'm not a spiritual person, but I painted myself into a corner of fear, of belief that this most terrible thing was true, and that because of its truth, I was condemned to live out the rest of my life in this broken state and never, experience life in, quotation marks, in the right way. This is a condition that is called a depersonalization, derealization, the sort of feeling, chronic feeling of sort of an out of body experience, feeling disconnected from yourself, your thoughts, your words that you say, your everything you see. It's all encompassing, a absolutely all encompassing existential anxiety. And for a long time, I said I was possessed of the idea that that was my main issue, was this thing called DPDR, and that it was incurable, untreatable. There's no medication for it. I'm just screwed. And it was when I was that emerged when I was, in my early 20s, and I got on medication, and I was in therapy, and I got over it. I got over it. My life got better. My life got remarkably better when I started taking medication again, and I got away from, these really bad beliefs. But there still was this sort of semi-religious belief in my mind that that state of mind is one that if I ever returned to it, I would be, it would do all the things that it did before. It would negate all of my accomplishments. It would make everything impossible. I would be a ruined individual. Now, I'm saying this, but the thing that is difficult about this condition, about OCD, and about mental illness in general, as an aside, is that I can describe this in words, but there is no way for me to explain adequately the amount of distress that this really causes. It is utter and complete suffering. Just what it is. It is the worst, state that you can be in. It is a terrible, terrible, hurtful thing. So I magically got over it. How did I get over it? I can't remember exactly. I can tell you, and this is sort of funny, sort of sad, but I invested in my health. I worked out a lot. I went back to school. I got my degree. I did a lot of lifestyle changes, but the thing that I eventually gave all the credit to was that I got on medication. And in my mind, what I told myself was that I was screwed, and then I got on medication and everything got better. So what later happened was, this was all a setup, right? It was an OCD setup. I was setting up a future in which it was possible for this thing to reoccur, and a future that was possible where if the meds failed me, then I had no agency to fix things for myself. So when I was in my early mid 30s and these terrible life events happened, I also at the same time made the really, okay, I was about to say stupid, but I'm trying to be a little bit more compassionate to myself. I made a bad decision to experiment with weed again when it became legal. And weed had previously been an antagonist to those sensations of sort of dissociation that I had experienced previously. So I started to feel like these sensations were reemerging in me. And at the same time, all this terrible stuff was happening in my life. And everything around me just collapsed because I became possessed of that obsession again, which was, oh no, I've re-entered this mental state that is, dissociative. I can't get rid of it now because I'm already on the medication, which took it away before. So now this medication doesn't work, and I am bereft of options. I'm just screwed. And that was a state of mind that lasted for several years until I as I said, I experimented. I'm going to change my medication. and that didn't work. What that did was antagonize all those fears that I had of like any medication, any drugs. Drugs did this to me. Now drugs can't save me, and blah 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 blah. Everything went off the rails. It was utter misery.
And what got you out of it?
So I said I entered OCD specific therapy, and my initial uh, urge with that was to combat the dissociative obsession, that existential fear of ruminating on my own perception and the quality of it, with OCD specific therapy. So I entered into that, and we tried a number of different things. Some of the exposure work that we did was helpful in combating little uh, parts of my obsessive constellation, and other things were less helpful in it. Ultimately, it was it's an well, I'm not cured. I mean, I guess is what I should say. I mean, like, this didn't magically take anything away. What it did was, over the course of several years, I got a lot of knowledge about my condition as a whole and the various ways that this presents itself. And in my experience and in that therapy, I would talk to the therapist, and I said, well, I this happened to me when I was in my 20s. I had a really intense sexual dream, a homoerotic dream, and I became obsessed with the idea that I was lying to myself, and I was really a gay man. And even though I'd always thought of myself as I only had heterosexual urges since I was a kid, and I thought that I was living a lie, and that because of this dream, everything threw my reality out of whack. And it turns out, oh yeah, that's a thing that happens with people who have obsessive compulsive disorders. It's called sexual orientation OCD. Not uncommon, and it presents itself in all the ways that I had experienced. I also had been having, at that time that I entered therapy, a difficulty in my relationship with my fiance, my now wife, and these thoughts about, are we, do I really love her? Am I supposed to be with this person? Maybe I should break up with her because I don't think that this is right, or there's something wrong here. And that is another presentation of OCD called relationship OCD. And so through therapy with a specific OCD bent, I found not relief of all of my problems, which you don't get necessarily in therapy, but I did get a lot of knowledge so that OCD couldn't sneak up on me as much anymore. When something would happen, I would be able to say, okay, this is what's happening. My OCD is picking this thing, and it is focusing on that. And by being aware that that is the process that takes place, I can intercede with my actions. That doesn't necessarily reduce my anxiety, but it does reduce, like in the short term, but it can reduce it in the long term. And it will, it leads to, let's say, better life decisions.
Yeah, I think so many people and just have this perception of OCD being like, oh, somebody does something, 3 times or whatever, as this really
Yeah.
simplified, like, oh, they do something habitually and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So this insight is so, I mean, I'm sorry you have to go through all of it, but it's so great for me and whoever's listening to learn.
Sure. They
'Cause,
don't, I
yeah,
mean,
it's
this
just
is
so much
not
more
like
than that.
common
Yeah.
knowledge, right? Because there's a concept where, uh, like in patent law, if a term that's a brand name gets consistently used as like a verb, then you can lose your trademark on your brand name, right? So Xerox for a long period of time fought to have people not say Xerox. I'm going to Xerox this piece of paper. I'm going to Xerox this. That, you know, you're to make a photocopy of it. And I mention this because OCD is like a brand name that gets thrown around to so many things. If you are a little bit fastidious about how you like to clean your house, I'm OCD about being clean. If you're, you know, you like to get your, I don't know, it comes up a lot for cleanliness. That's the thing that pops out to me a lot. But also, like, people need to organize their stuff. Oh, I'm a little OCD, you know, and it's this thing that just gets thrown as a blanket statement for everything. And it's so it's a huge pet peeve, but it's also really detrimental. And I'll cite a couple of specific instances. When I was a kid, you know, teenager, there was a show in the 90s called Monk that I never watched, but it was popular. It was a very popular show starring Tony Shalhoub, and he played a detective that had OCD. And because he had OCD, he was very particular about the ways that, you know, he liked to have things, and everything had to be just so. He was very, you know, like I say, fastidious. But his OCD made him a better crime fighter because of his attention to detail and his ability to focus on things, and, you know, just this total fallacy of what disability is. It's like the classic, like, blind kung fu master idea, where you have a disability and it actually makes you stronger in other ways by, like, heightening your other senses. Like, there's the superhero Daredevil who is blind, but he uses like echolocation or something to, you know, fight villains. And it's out there, it's in the water. That's what people think. They don't think it's, they may not know, they may know that it's not true, and that something like blindness is a very serious condition, but in the back of their mind they might also think, like, I wonder if his hearing is a little better because he's blind, you know, like, I wonder if he's getting around, like, I wonder if that's, you know, compensating. And there is a little something to that, but it's still a disability. Like, it is not a desirable thing. People who are blind, I'm sure, would tell you they would rather, a lot of people, I don't want to speak for every blind person, but, you know, it's not you don't choose that. That's not the thing that, you know, you're like, yeah, that's a better way to be. No, it's something that you deal with. And you can live your life and experience meaning and happiness and good relationships and all those things despite your disability, but it is a disability. So an OCD is a, you know, it's a registered disability, like a depression or, you know, a number of other mental health conditions. But I refer back to this TV show because it was so popular, and that was what I knew about of OCD. I knew two things. The two things that I had heard, you know, I sort of growing up before the internet became really prevalent when I was like in my senior year of high school or around then. So there was a show, and I also somewhere had heard that the guy who hosted Double Dare on TV, Mark Summers, had OCD, and he had a thing about the fibers in the carpet in his green room all had to face the same way or something, you know. And I thought, wow, that's a weird thing, but you don't really dig into it much deeper, right? So there's these pop culture perceptions of what OCD is, that persist completely to this day. And you know, that TV show was on years and years and years ago. You know, it probably first came on almost 25 years ago now. But apparently, just looking at the Wikipedia page, Monk was back for COVID-19, had a little TV special,
Oh,
and
of course they did.
I'm like, because he's a germaphobe. He's such a he's a quaint, cute little germaphobe with OCD. And I, full disclosure, I never watched this show because fuck that show. But uh, they may get super grounded about the condition and really dig into it, but I doubt that's the case because this is a comedy drama, and the reality of OCD is not it's not funny, and uh, it is really really harmful. The other person that I think has a perception in the public now for OCD is maybe not household name, but Maria Bamford, the comedian, has OCD and talks about it frequently, and I like her a lot. I think she's very funny and sometimes quite insightful about what she says. But there was this ad campaign that happened recently between her and a one of these therapy apps on the phone, where they had Maria Bamford go out in like a man on the street thing and do a little like, hey, I have this little thought about my dog. I think my dog's sexy. Is that an OCD thought? And then like interview people with these weird, quirky, like funny things about OCD. And there was no context to it at all. There was no like, yes, we can laugh about this, but also OCD is a debilitating condition for many people and makes their lives a lot harder than it needs to be, leads to many other things. There was none of that. And I just, it just set my teeth on edge, the whole thing. Like, it's, it's hurtful and irresponsible. I think those things. And I'm sure that this is not restricted to OCD, but as far as like depictions in popular culture, which are contradictory to the actual experience of that condition or lifestyle, certainly not confined only to OCD. But that's my, that's the thing that I can say I have, I have skin in the game on, and so the ways that it's in the world, the ways that it is treated and thought of as this thing that's kind of cute and funny and gives, people are very particular. They have little foibles, or oh, you just roll your eyes at them because they have to have things a real specific way, and darn their OCD. That's what people think of it as, and it's not. People kill themselves. Suicide is an issue. People who deal with this condition, live out, really difficult existences without access to proper therapy or medication or both. And it's a serious, serious thing that, of course, you can find humor in after the fact, but I can, the one thing that I can guarantee you is that anybody who struggles with OCD, it's not funny when they're in it.
We're getting close to that hour mark. Was there anything else? Also, that was beautiful. Sorry, that was kind of like an awkward segue, but I really
Oh no, no.
appreciate what you said. But was
Sure.
there anything else you wanted to touch on?
I think that covers most of the things. I would just encourage anybody who thinks that they may have uh, OCD, if they have problems regulating their thoughts. They find themselves regularly very distressed by the things that are going on in their own heads. Um, Finding themselves at odds with themselves in that way, I would very much encourage them to seek out professional assistance, and talk to someone. Talk therapy is can be a very powerful thing. And the most important thing about anything with mental health is, and I this is my personal feeling, but uh, I truly believe that as one of us goes, so go we all. And we have to support each other, even if we're not talking about OCD, we're talking about depression, we're talking about, something that is, a very difficult condition. I, again, encourage people to get support, and encourage other people who are suffering with it to help the people around them if they can, and they have bandwidth to try and support others, because it's a terrible, terrible thing if anybody ever succumbs to these problems, and we should do what we can to ever prevent that from happening.
Agreed. I think that's why it's really important to have conversations like this. And as someone with bipolar 1, I love talking about myself and telling people about all the crazy shit I've said and done, because more often than not, people are like, oh, I've experienced something similar, or I have these crazy thoughts too. And it's
Yeah.
so good to make those connections and just realize that you're not alone. And like, maybe you are crazy, but like it's okay because there's help for you. Um like, it's
Yeah, I
gonna be
mean, normalizing is very important as well. Like you're mentioning, I think that something that I do, and I guess other people with OCD too, and other people with other kinds of mental illness, like you start to feel like so weird, because maybe you're the only person who's going through this. Like, this is so specific to you. It's deeply personal. Nobody else could be going through this, because how is that even possible? That anybody else is as fucked up as I am. And you start talking to people, and it's like, oh shit, like I don't know if it's better or worse, but it seems like most of humanity is suffering a lot of the time. um, I know something that's, this is an aside, but is very difficult for me to have this perception that I'm the one who's hurting the most, and my life is the one that's invalid because of these problems. The truth is that everybody's dealing with something, and uh, there are certainly people who are in more or less distress, but it's very, very, very common, especially now, for people to be suffering in really significant ways with mental health, and it's not an abnormal thing. That doesn't open the door to trivialize it, but more than that, should open the door for people to feel as if they're part of this community, a large human community that is hurting, that does feel these ways, and they can get support and strength from those other people.
If anyone wants to find your work or more of what you do, how can they find you?
I am currently mostly using Instagram to share my work, and my Instagram account is at Mr. Mungo, which is just all spelled out, MisterMungo. Mr. Mungo is a little character that I created, that I sort of use as a stand-in for myself, to tell stories that are related to, but not exclusively about, mental health.
Mr. Mungo's great. I love him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. He's my little guy who came out of I was changing my medication again earlier this year, over in the summer, and I subconsciously, I think I wanted to start making work that had a little bit more distance between my name, myself, and these stories. And so I started using this character to put these things into, so that you know, if somebody reads it, I really, the thing was, I was worried that people kept reading these things that I would write and worry about me personally, like they would, feel sorry for me or be worried about me. And I desperately did not want that to be the case. I want to be able to speak, the truth honestly, but the reaction to it that I want is not like, "Oh, are you okay?" It's
Do I
not
need to call the
that.
doctor? Yeah, no.
Right. Yeah. It's absolutely not that. So it was helpful to uh, kind of put those things into a character so that people can read it in that way. And it is me, but it's not me. And also, it's a way for me to house other ideas and explore other things too.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for, again, not just in this interview, but on your Instagram and stuff, just see super open, honest artwork. And this was a great interview. I have not had enough coffee today, and you carried it. And I am so appreciative. I like pounded a bunch of tea, but it wasn't enough. Um, but
It's
yeah,
okay.
thank you
I
so much.
really I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this stuff, and I think it's important to combat the perception of what's out there.
All right, folks, that's it for this month's episode. If you weren't aware, they come out the first Friday of every month. It gives me lots of time to edit, and it's just kind of a realistic timeline for myself. So that's why they're not once a week or every other week. I want to have the best content as possible for y'all while still keeping myself in check. And let's see, if you want to, I would love it if you subscribed, and that'll make it easier for you to keep on top of new episodes. The best way to support the podcast would be to just let people know about it. I think if you encourage people to listen to whatever episodes sound most interesting rather than starting at the beginning, that's probably a good way to get into it. And let's see. I also have a PayPal. It's just my personal PayPal, but if you wanted to throw a few bucks my way, that's fine. I will throw that link in the show description. And let's see, the upcoming episodes. So I'm recording this episode in December of 2021, and it won't be airing until February. But as of right now, I have tentatively planned episodes on the federal siege of Ruby Ridge, and then also an episode on schizophrenia. So be sure and, again, subscribe so you don't miss those episodes. And thanks for listening.